Minyu stood in the great hall of the Coalition Council and felt small. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see it. Around him sat the representatives of 47 different species. All of them were bigger than humans. All of them were stronger. And all of them looked down at him with either pity or disgust. He wore his best suit, the one that Earth's government had given him for these meetings. It didn't matter. The council members still called him the pet when they thought he couldn't hear. "The tribute quota has been increased," announced the High Chancellor, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. "All vassal species will now provide 30% of their young for education and service." Minyu's hands shook. 30%. That meant nearly 1 in 3 human children would be taken from their families, taken to worlds, raised to forget they were human, raised to serve an empire that saw them as property. "Your Excellency," Minyu said, stepping forward. His voice echoed in the huge chamber. "Humanity already struggles with the current quota. We cannot." "You will comply," the High Chancellor interrupted, "or Earth will face correction." Everyone in the chamber knew what correction meant. It meant ships in orbit. It meant cities turned to ash. It meant millions dead as a warning to the rest. Minyu bowed his head and said nothing more. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain sat in her command chair aboard the... It was one of the last military ships humans were allowed to keep. The Coalition permitted it only because someone had to patrol the outer colonies and deal with pirates. Real military vessels were forbidden. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call," her communications officer reported. "It's from Settlement Gamma 7. "Put it through," ordered. Static filled the bridge, then a woman's terrified voice. "They're taking everyone. Please, someone help us. They're taking the children and killing anyone who..." The transmission ended. Screw looked at her with desperate eyes. They all knew what had happened. Coalition raiders had hit another human settlement. They did this sometimes, taking more than the quota required. No one stopped them. No one could. "Set course for Gamma 7, said quietly. "Captain, by the time we get there," her first officer began. "I know," said, "but we have to try." They arrived 6 hours later. The settlement was burning. Bodies lay in the streets. The raiders were gone, along with every child under the age of 12. 32 children, just gone. Walked through the ruins with her crew. An old man grabbed her arm. His face was covered in blood. "Why didn't you stop them?" he cried. "Why didn't you protect us?" Had no answer. She pulled her arm free and returned to her ship. In her quarters, she sat alone in the dark and wondered how much longer humans could survive like this. Deep underground on Earth, in tunnels that the Coalition didn't know existed, met with her resistance cell. There were 12 of them tonight. All of them had lost family to the tribute. All of them had sworn to fight back, even if it meant their deaths. "I have new information," said, connecting her data pad to the projector. "One of our people inside Coalition administration got access to classified files." The screen showed a list of species names. Most of them were marked with a red symbol. "What does the red mark mean?" someone asked. "Extinct," replied. "These species all rebelled against the Coalition. None of them exist anymore." The room went silent. Everyone stared at the 12 red-marked names. "There's more," continued. "We found records of what the Coalition plans for us. They call it the compliance timeline. In 5 years, they'll decide if we're worth keeping, if they think we're too much trouble." She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. "So what do we do?" a young man asked. "We can't fight them. Look what happened to those other species." "We prepare," said, "and we hope." In a hidden base carved into an asteroid far from Earth, worked on his secret project. He had been working on it for 15 years. Around him, dozens of engineers and scientists did the same. This was Project Prometheus, named after the ancient human myth of stolen fire. "Doctor, the new power core is ready for testing," his assistant said. looked at the device before him. It was a ship engine, but not like any engine the Coalition had ever seen. It used technology that humans had stolen and improved. Technology that could power weapons. Technology that could power ships fast enough to fight back. "Begin the test," he ordered. The engine hummed to life. Energy readings climbed higher and higher. It didn't explode. It didn't fail. It worked perfectly. "How many more do we need?" his assistant asked. "For a real fleet," calculated in his head, "at least 500, maybe more." "That will take years." "Then we'd better keep working," said. He knew what they were building here. They were building humanity's last hope. If the Coalition discovered this place, everyone here would die. Earth would be destroyed. But if they succeeded, if they could build enough ships in secret, maybe humans could fight back. Maybe they could win. Back at the Coalition Council, Minyu received new orders from Earth's government. He was to agree to everything the Coalition demanded. No arguments, no protests. Earth couldn't afford to anger their masters. He read the orders 3 times, then deleted them. That night, Minyu sent encrypted messages to contacts throughout the galaxy. People he had met during his years as ambassador, other vassal species, criminal networks, anyone who might listen. His message was simple: humanity is preparing. When the time comes, will you stand with us? Most didn't reply. A few sent back warnings to be careful, but 3 replied with a single word: yes. It was a start. Minyu looked out his window at the alien stars and thought about Earth. He thought about children being torn from their parents. He thought about settlements burning. He thought about an empire that believed humans would always submit, would always obey, would always be slaves. Something was changing inside humanity. Minyu could feel it in every message from Earth, in every report from the colonies. People were getting tired of bowing, tired of obeying, tired of watching their children disappear. The Coalition had ruled for thousands of years. They had crushed dozens of rebellions. They believed they were invincible. But they had never faced humans before. They had never faced a species that remembered every insult, every death, every stolen child. They had never faced a species that could smile and bow while building weapons in the dark. Minyu knew that war was coming. The only question was when, and whether humanity would be ready. He returned to his desk and continued his work, sending messages, building alliances, preparing for the day when someone would finally say the words that needed to be said. The day when humanity would say, "No more." Held his little sister's hand as they walked home from school. Was only 8 years old and talked about everything she had learned that day. She showed him a drawing she made of their family. Mom, Dad, and her, all smiling under a blue sky. "Do you think the sky was always this color?" asked. "Teacher said before the Coalition came, Earth looked different." "I don't know," lied. He knew. Everyone over 20 knew. Earth's sky had been clearer before the massive industrial complexes the Coalition built, before the mining operations that carved scars into the planet. But children didn't need to know how much had been stolen from them. They turned onto their street and hearts stopped. A Coalition transport vehicle sat in front of their house. 2 enforcers stood at the door. His mother was crying. His father was shouting. "No, she's too young. The quota was already filled this month." One enforcer hit his father with a shock stick. His father collapsed. "Run," screamed at, but it was too late. The enforcers had seen them. Everything happened so fast. The enforcers grabbed, she screamed for, his mother tried to pull her back. The enforcer raised his weapon. Didn't think, he ran forward. He grabbed the enforcer's arm. The weapon fired anyway. His mother fell. His father tried to stand. The other enforcer shot him too. His hands found the weapon. He didn't know how it worked, but he pulled every control he could find. The energy blast caught the first enforcer in the chest. The second enforcer turned toward him, fired again. Both enforcers lay dead. was screaming. Neighbors were watching from windows, knew what would happen next. Coalition death squads would come. They would kill everyone on this street as punishment. "I'm sorry," he whispered too. Then he ran, leaving his sister crying beside their dead parents. By morning, every human in the galaxy had seen the video. Someone had recorded it. Someone had uploaded it to the networks. Coalition censors tried to delete it, but copies spread too fast. They saw a young man defending his family. They saw enforcers murdering parents. They saw a child screaming for help that never came. And they saw kill 2 coalition enforcers with their own weapons. It was the first time in 40 years that a human had struck back. The first time someone had said no with violence instead of words. Across Earth and every human colony, something changed. People watched that video and felt something they hadn't felt in decades: anger. Sara was a scientist who worked in coalition communications. She wasn't supposed to have access to military files, but she had learned to be clever. She had learned to hide, and she had been copying classified data for 3 years. The day after's video spread, Sara found something that made her blood turn cold. A file marked Compliance Adjustment Schedule. She opened it. Inside were detailed plans for what the coalition called population reduction of species that showed insufficient loyalty. Humanity was on the list. In 5 years, coalition fleets would arrive at Earth. 3 billion humans would be killed as a warning. The rest would be moved to labor camps on mining worlds. Sara the file to a dozen different drives. Then she walked out of the coalition facility and never went back. She sent the files everywhere, to resistance groups, to news networks, to government officials. Within hours, humanity knew the truth. The coalition had always planned to exterminate them. The tributes, the quotas, the obedience, none of it mattered. Humans were scheduled to die. Had been one of the tribute children. He was taken at age 6 and raised on a coalition military world. They trained him to be an officer. They taught him to fight. They tried to teach him to forget he was human. They failed. When he saw his video, something broke inside him. When he saw Sara's leaked files, his decision was made. He stole a coalition transport ship and flew toward Earth. In the ship's databanks, he carried complete military protocols, fleet movements, and battle strategies. He knew the coalition would hunt him. He didn't care. Humanity needed this information, and he was still human enough to give it to them. Was Earth's communications director. She had spent years carefully crafting messages that wouldn't anger the coalition. She had learned to speak without saying anything important. She had become an expert at making surrender sound like cooperation. But when she saw his video and Sara's files, she made a different kind of message. She stood before every camera on Earth and in every colony. She spoke to billions of humans at once. For 40 years we have obeyed. We have given them our children. We have given them our resources. We have bowed and smiled and pretended that we accepted our place in their empire. We did this because we believed that obedience would keep us safe. Today, we learned the truth. We were always going to die. The only question was whether we would die on our knees or on our feet. She paused, letting her words sink in. The coalition expects us to beg for mercy. They expect us to negotiate for a few more years of slavery. They expect us to give them more children, more resources, more of our lives in exchange for empty promises. I say no more. Humanity says no more. We will not beg. We will not bow. We will fight, and if we die, we will die free. The Coalition Council received broadcast within the hour. They laughed. They had heard such speeches before from doomed species. Words meant nothing without power. But Minu stood in that council chamber and delivered humanity's formal message. The human species hereby terminates all agreements with the coalition. We will provide no more tribute. We will obey no more orders. We declare ourselves free and independent. Any coalition vessel entering human space will be considered an act of war. The High Chancellor looked at him with something like amusement. You declare war, with what ships, with what weapons? You have nothing. We have ourselves, Minyu said, and that has always been enough. He turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the coalition representatives discussed the rebellion. They decided to send a punishment fleet to Earth. It was standard procedure. Show overwhelming force, destroy a few cities, and the rebellion would collapse. It always worked. But in hidden asteroid bases, received the message he had been waiting for. The time had come to reveal Project Prometheus. Activate all hidden shipyards, he ordered. Bring every vessel online. Contact every crew, it's time. Across the outer solar system, hundreds of ships began to power up. They were human ships, built in secret over 15 years. They weren't as large as coalition vessels, but they were fast, and they were armed with stolen technology that the coalition didn't know humans possessed. Captain received orders to report to coordinates deep in the asteroid belt. When she arrived, she found herself looking at a hidden fleet. Hundreds of ships, thousands of crew members, all human, all ready to fight. Welcome to the real human military, a woman told her. We've been waiting for this day. Walk through the fleet base in amazement. Fighter craft, frigates, even a few capital ships, all built in secret, all crewed by people who had been preparing for this war for years. When do we strike? Asked. Soon, the woman replied, very soon. The coalition punishment fleet entered Earth's solar system 3 days later. 50 warships, more than enough to crush any human resistance. They broadcast their demands: surrender immediately or face destruction. Instead, they found fleet waiting for them. The Battle of Jupiter began when human ships emerged from the shadows of Jupiter's moons. The coalition admiral couldn't believe what he was seeing. Humans didn't have a fleet. Humans weren't supposed to have weapons. But the missiles and energy beams were very real. The battle lasted 6 hours. Humanity lost more than half its ships. Thousands died in the fighting. But when it ended, every single coalition vessel was destroyed. The galaxy watched in shock. A vassal species had just won a battle against the coalition. It shouldn't have been possible. But humans had learned something the coalition never understood. Sometimes survival isn't about being stronger. Sometimes it's about refusing to accept defeat, no matter the cost. The coalition high command gathered in emergency session. Around the war table, generals and admirals from a dozen species argued about what had happened at Jupiter. It was luck, one insisted. They caught our fleet by surprise. Then we send a larger fleet, another replied. 10 times larger, we crush them properly. The vote was unanimous. A punishment fleet would be assembled. Not 50 ships this time, but 500. They would reduce Earth to ash and make an example that would terrify every vassal species for generations. Admiral received the intelligence report aboard the human command ship. 500 coalition vessels were gathering at their staging base. They would arrive at Earth in 2 weeks. We have maybe 200 operational ships, his second-in-command said. How do we fight 500? We don't fight them head-on, replied. We make them bleed for every meter of space. He called together every ship captain in the human fleet. On the video screen, dozens of faces looked back at him. All of them knew they were probably going to die. The coalition thinks this is a conventional war, said. They think we'll meet them in open battle and they'll crush us with superior numbers. We're going to teach them that humans don't fight conventional wars. On Earth, organized the ground resistance. She had been a military strategist before the coalition banned human armies. Now she put her training to use planning guerrilla operations. If they land troops, we make every street a battlefield, she told her teams. We don't hold territory. We hit and run. We make them afraid to walk outside their bases. We make occupation too expensive to maintain. Her people spread throughout Earth's cities. They hid weapons in civilian buildings. They mapped escape routes through subway tunnels. They prepared for the kind of brutal, grinding urban warfare that broke the spirit of even the strongest armies. "What if they just bomb everything from orbit?" someone asked. "Then we die," said simply, "but we make sure they remember the cost." Was a cyber warfare specialist. He had spent years studying coalition computer systems, learning their weaknesses. When war began, he unleashed every virus and hack he had prepared. Coalition military communications started failing. Ship targeting systems developed strange glitches. Navigation computers sent vessels to wrong coordinates, and every message sent by Coalition Command was intercepted, translated, and broadcast to every species in the galaxy. The broadcasts revealed 40 years of Coalition atrocities, messages about destroyed species, orders to execute prisoners, reports bragging about how many children they had taken from their families, everything that the Coalition wanted to hide made public. "They're going to track this back to me eventually," told his team. "How long do we have?" his assistant asked. "Maybe a few weeks, maybe less. Let's make them count." Ran a smuggling operation between human colonies and other vassal species territories. She knew every black market dealer, every corrupt official, every secret route that Coalition patrols missed. When war started, she converted her smuggling network into a weapons distribution system. "You're giving guns to other species," her first mate asked. "Won't that come back to hurt us?" "The Coalition can't fight everyone at once," replied. "Every species that rebels is one less fleet they can send against Earth." She made contact with resistance groups across Coalition space. They were small, poorly armed, and terrified of fighting. Gave them weapons and something more important, hope. "Look what humans did," she told them. "We destroyed a Coalition fleet. If we can do it, so can you." Rebellions started on 6 different worlds, small at first, acts of sabotage, attacks on Coalition facilities, but each act inspired others. The Coalition's perfect order was cracking. The Coalition Grand Armada finally departed for Earth. 500 ships carrying 500,000 soldiers, the largest military operation in Coalition history. They broadcast their approach, wanting humans to feel fear. Instead, humans prepared surprises. When the Armada reached the outer solar system, the mines activated. Hundreds of automated weapons that Sora's team had scattered throughout the region. They weren't powerful enough to destroy capital ships, but they damaged engines, killed shields, and forced the fleet to slow down. Then came the fighter attacks. Small human craft that struck from multiple directions, fired missiles, and disappeared before the Coalition could respond. They were like insects, too small to kill easily but dangerous in swarms. The Coalition admiral grew frustrated. Why won't they stand and fight? "Because they're not stupid," his tactical officer replied. For 3 days, the Coalition Armada crawled toward Earth, bleeding ships the entire way. The humans wouldn't engage in the decisive battle the Coalition wanted. They just kept attacking, retreating, and attacking again. Led one of the fighter squadrons. Her small ship carried barely enough weapons to scratch a Coalition cruiser's paint, but she knew where to hit. Engine clusters, sensor arrays, communication dishes, anything that would slow the enemy down. "Captain, we're running out of ammunition," her co-pilot said. "Then we'll make the last shots count," replied. She guided her squadron toward a Coalition supply vessel. It wasn't a combat ship, but it carried fuel and ammunition for the fleet. The human fighters released every missile they had, then turned and ran. Behind them, the supply vessel exploded in a fireball that destroyed 2 escort ships and damaged 3 more. The Coalition finally reached Earth's orbit with fewer than 400 ships remaining. They prepared to begin orbital bombardment. That's when activated his final surprise. Hidden throughout the solar system were devices he had spent 5 years developing. They generated a field that disrupted faster-than-light travel. When he turned them on, the entire Earth system became a trap. Coalition ships could enter, but they couldn't leave. "What have you done?" the Coalition admiral demanded when he realized what had happened. "We've made sure you can't run away," replied over an open channel. "Now you have to fight us, all of us, until one side is destroyed." The Battle of Earth began in earnest. Human ships used kamikaze tactics, ramming Coalition vessels when they ran out of weapons. Automated drones hunted in packs, targeting damaged ships, and from Earth's surface, massive fired projectiles into orbit. The Coalition had superior firepower and armor, but humans had desperation and creativity. They used every dirty trick, every unexpected tactic, every weapon they could think of. The battle raged for 2 weeks. Space around Earth became a graveyard of burning ships. Debris fields stretched for millions of kilometers. Both sides suffered horrific casualties. But something strange was happening to the Coalition forces. Their soldiers started making mistakes. Their commanders hesitated. Their crews showed signs of psychological breakdown. Was a medical officer who interviewed captured Coalition soldiers. What she learned shocked her. "They've never fought anyone who wouldn't surrender," she reported to. "In their entire history, vassal species always gave up after losing the first few battles. They don't know how to handle an enemy that just keeps fighting." "Good," said, "then we keep fighting." News of the Earth battle spread throughout the galaxy. On vassal worlds everywhere, people watched humans refuse to surrender despite terrible losses. They saw a species that would rather die than submit. And they started asking themselves, why do we still obey? Rebellions exploded across Coalition space. 20 different species rose up at once. The Coalition tried to send forces to crush each rebellion, but they didn't have enough ships. Too many were trapped at Earth, locked in an endless battle with humans who simply wouldn't die. Minu watched from Earth as the Coalition empire began to fracture. He sent messages to the rebel movements, coordinating strategy, sharing intelligence. Humanity couldn't win this war alone, but together with the other vassal species, they might have a chance. The Coalition High Command finally understood their mistake. They hadn't been fighting a war for territory or resources. They had been fighting a war for the soul of their empire. And they were losing. "Order all fleets to withdraw to the High Chancellor commanded. "We'll regroup and crush these rebellions one at a time." But their fleets at Earth couldn't withdraw. Field kept them trapped. And every day they stayed, more ships were destroyed, more soldiers died, and more species across the galaxy learned that the Coalition could bleed. The Coalition had ruled through fear for thousands of years. But fear only worked as long as people believed resistance was hopeless. Humans had proven it wasn't, and once that lesson spread, the Empire's days were numbered. The Coalition fleet trapped at Earth had been fighting for 3 weeks. They had lost more than half their ships. Their soldiers were exhausted. Their supplies were running low, and still the humans kept fighting. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display. Red dots marked Coalition vessels. Blue dots marked human ships. There were far more red than blue, but the red kept disappearing one by one. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Coalition flagship," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," ordered. The Coalition admiral appeared on screen. He looked tired. Behind him, smoke filled his bridge from a recent hit. "We request negotiations for ceasefire," the Coalition admiral said. "The only negotiation is your unconditional surrender," replied. "That's unacceptable." "Then we keep killing each other until one side is gone," said. "Your choice." The transmission ended. 2 hours later, another 10 Coalition ships were destroyed. The admiral contacted again. "What are your terms?" Across the galaxy, 23 species were now in open rebellion. The coalition tried to maintain control, but their forces were scattered and demoralized. Every time they crushed one rebellion, two more started. Minu worked day and night coordinating with rebel leaders. He provided intelligence, tactical advice, and most importantly, hope. The coalition is evacuating their garrison on Velar 5, he told a rebel commander via encrypted channel. If you strike now, you can take the capital without a fight. How do you know this? The commander asked. Intercepts everything they send, Minu replied. We know their movements better than they do. The rebellion on Velar 5 succeeded. The coalition garrison fled, leaving behind weapons and supplies. The rebels claimed their first independent world. News of the victory spread immediately. 6 more species declared independence within days. Was 20 years old and had never expected to be a war hero. He had been a maintenance worker at a space station before the war, but when fighting started, he volunteered as a pilot. His squadron operated out of the asteroid belt, hitting coalition supply lines and running away before the enemy could respond. They weren't the strongest or most skilled pilots. They were just determined. Target the fuel tanker, ordered his wingman. Without fuel, those battleships can't maneuver. They dove toward the coalition convoy. Energy weapons lit up space around them. 2 human fighters exploded, but reached the tanker and released his missiles. The tanker erupted in a massive explosion that crippled 4 coalition warships. Squadrons scattered before the escorts could catch them. 3 hours later, fleet attacked the crippled battleships. Without fuel to maneuver or power their shields, the mighty vessels were helpless. All 4 were destroyed. The coalition was learning a painful lesson. In war, strength matters less than will, and humans had more will than any species the coalition had ever faced. Sara continued her cyber warfare campaign from a hidden base on Mars. She and her team had infiltrated every coalition network they could find. They didn't just steal information anymore. They sabotaged it. I'm uploading false fleet positions to their navigation database, one of her programmers reported. What kind of false positions? Sora asked. I'm telling their reinforcement fleets that Earth is 3 light years in the wrong direction. Sora smiled. How long until they notice? About a week. By then, those fleets will be too far away to help. Coalition reinforcements jumped to the coordinates their computers provided. They arrived at empty space, far from any human worlds. By the time they realized the mistake and recalculated, the battle at Earth was over. Ground forces had been preparing for coalition landing parties, but the enemy never got that far. The orbital battle consumed all their attention. Still, she kept her people ready. We might not have to fight today, she told her teams, but tomorrow is always another day. Stay sharp. In the rubble of Earth's cities, resistance fighters trained and waited. They had learned to live with the possibility of dying at any moment. It made them harder, colder, and absolutely focused on survival. Smuggling network had evolved into something much larger. She now coordinated weapon shipments to rebel groups across 30 different worlds. The coalition tried to hunt her, but she always stayed one step ahead. They're offering a bounty for your capture, her first mate warned. 5 million credits. Only 5 million, laughed. I'm insulted. She met with a rebel leader from a species called the. They had been under coalition rule for 200 years and had never considered rebellion until humans showed it was possible. We need anti-ship weapons, the leader said. Our people are ready to fight, but we can't damage coalition vessels. I'll get you what you need, promised. Hit their orbital platforms hard and fast. Make them afraid to stay in orbit above your world. The rebellion succeeded 3 weeks later. They captured 4 coalition ships and used them to start their own fleet. At Earth, the battle was reaching its end. The coalition had fewer than 50 ships remaining. They were surrounded, cut off from resupply, and facing an enemy that simply would not stop attacking. Led a final massive assault. Every human ship that could still fly joined the attack. They came from every direction at once, overwhelming the coalition's depleted defenses. For Earth, someone screamed over the radio. For our children, another voice added. For everyone they took from us, a third shouted. The coalition admiral knew it was over. He could surrender and face judgment for his crimes, or he could die fighting. He chose to surrender. All coalition vessels cease fire, he broadcast. We surrender unconditionally. The Battle of Earth was over. Humanity had won. The cost was terrible. More than 100,000 humans had died. 2/3 of Earth's orbital infrastructure was destroyed. The planet itself bore scars from debris impacts, but they were free. Worked in the medical centers treating the wounded. Human wounded, mostly, but also some coalition soldiers who had been captured. She documented everything she saw. Many coalition soldiers are showing severe trauma, she reported. They keep saying the same thing. Humans don't fight like this. They don't understand an enemy that accepts death as an acceptable outcome. That's because they've never been desperate enough to fight that way, replied. They've always been the conquerors. They've never been the ones fighting for survival. News of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. The impossible had happened. A vassal species had defeated a coalition grand armada. The empire that had ruled had been beaten by humans and their refusal to accept defeat. Rebellions intensified everywhere. Species that had been debating resistance now jumped into action. Coalition forces found themselves fighting on dozens of fronts simultaneously and losing most of them. Watched from the Lunar Command Center as coalition territory began to fracture on the galactic map. Red zones turned blue as world after world declared independence. We did it, his assistant said in amazement. Not yet, replied. They still have their core territories. This isn't over. Minyu received a message from the coalition high command. They wanted to negotiate, not surrender terms but a return to the old arrangement. They would reduce the tribute quotas. They would give humans more autonomy. Surely that was acceptable. Minyu read their offer 3 times, then deleted it. He sent his own message in return. There will be no return to slavery. There will be no tribute. There will be no negotiations. Surrender completely or face total war. The coalition leadership gathered for emergency session. For the first time in their civilization's history, they were losing a war. Not just losing battles, but losing their entire empire. We could negotiate limited independence for some species, one suggested. If we do that, everyone will demand it, another replied. Then we pull back to our core worlds and defend what we can hold, a third offered. The High Chancellor looked around at his commanders. He saw fear in their eyes, fear of humans, fear of the other rebellions, fear that their perfect order was collapsing. Prepare for siege, he ordered. If humans want to finish this war, they'll have to come to us. Fleet began preparations for the final campaign. They would take the fight to the coalition itself. It would be dangerous. It would cost lives. But it was the only way to ensure the war truly ended. When do we leave? Her crew asked. 1 week, replied. 1 week to repair, resupply, and mourn our dead, then we finish this. The human fleet assembled at the edge of coalition core territory. It was smaller than the armada that had attacked Earth, but it carried the weight of hope from dozens of species who had thrown off their chains. Stood on the bridge of her flagship and looked at the force under her command. 200 human ships and another 100 from newly freed species who had joined the fight. Not enough to conquer the coalition through force alone, but maybe enough to end the war. Send the ultimatum, she ordered. The message broadcast to the coalition high command was simple. Surrender now, face justice for your crimes, and this war ends. Refuse, and we will reduce you to ash just as you threatened to do to Earth. The reply came 6 hours later. We do not surrender to our former slaves. Then we're going in, said. The coalition was defended by their last major fleet. 300 warships surrounded the planet, ready to fight to the death. Behind them, the planetary shields could withstand orbital bombardment for months. Admiral studied the defenses and shook his head. A direct assault would cost us everything we have, and we might still lose. Then we don't assault directly, Minyu said. He had joined the fleet for this final battle. We do what we've been doing all along. We wait, we pressure, and we let them destroy themselves. The human fleet took positions outside weapons range and established a blockade. No ships in, no ships out. The coalition was cut off from the rest of their crumbling empire. How long can they survive under siege? Asked. Their planet can feed itself, reported. But they need resources from other worlds to maintain their fleet. Without resupply, those ships will start breaking down in a few months. Then we wait, decided. Days turned to weeks. The blockade held firm. Coalition ships tried to break through several times, but human forces drove them back with minimal losses. More importantly, the human fleet intercepted every supply ship trying to reach the. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the coalition empire continued to collapse. World after world declared independence. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were tasting freedom for the first time. Worked on Earth to help rebuild while the fleet fought at the coalition. The planet was, but people were already clearing rubble and planning new cities. Cities that would be built by humans for humans, with no coalition overseers watching. Do you think it's really over? Someone asked her. Not yet, replied, but soon. Had survived the war. He spent his days working with rescued tribute children, helping them relearn what it meant to be human. So many had been taken young and raised in coalition facilities. They spoke alien languages better than their own. They flinched when they saw other humans. It's okay, told a young boy who cowered in the corner. You're safe now. No one will hurt you here. Are you sure? The boy asked in a coalition language. I promise, replied. He thought about his sister still somewhere in coalition space. We're going to find everyone they took, every single one. At the coalition, the siege entered its third month. The defending fleet was showing signs of strain. Ships that broke down couldn't be repaired without parts from other worlds. Crews were exhausted from constant alert status. Morale was collapsing. Inside the High Council chambers, the coalition leadership argued among themselves. We should surrender while we still can negotiate terms, one counselor said. Never, the High Chancellor shouted. We are the coalition. We have ruled for 3,000 years. And now we're trapped on our own world by species we used to own, another counselor replied quietly. Perhaps it's time to accept reality. The vote was close, but it passed. The coalition would surrender. Minyu received the surrender offer with mixed feelings. They had won, but the cost had been enormous. Hundreds of thousands dead, worlds devastated, entire species traumatized by decades of slavery. What are the terms? Asked. They want amnesty for their leaders in exchange for complete disarmament, Minyu replied. Absolutely not, said immediately. They murdered billions over the centuries. They don't get to walk away. The negotiations took 2 weeks. In the end, the coalition agreed to unconditional surrender. Their leaders would face trial. Their military would be dismantled. Their empire would be dissolved. The Treaty of Terra was signed aboard a human vessel. Representatives from 37 species gathered to witness the moment. The coalition High Chancellor signed his name to the document that ended his civilization's rule over the galaxy. You think this changes anything? The High Chancellor said to Minyu. There will always be empires. There will always be slaves. This is the way of the universe. Maybe, Minyu replied. But now the slaves know they can fight back. That changes everything. War crimes tribunals began immediately. Coalition leaders and officers who had committed atrocities faced justice. Not human justice alone, but justice from all the species they had oppressed. The trials lasted for years. Compiled medical and psychological documentation of coalition crimes. Her reports filled thousands of pages. Testimony from survivors, evidence of massacres, records of children stolen from families. Every crime was documented, every victim remembered. Why does it matter? Someone asked her. The coalition is already defeated. Because we need to remember, replied, so we never let this happen again. The Free Worlds Alliance formed in the aftermath. 23 species joined together in a voluntary association based on mutual defense and cooperation. Humanity was a founding member, but not the leader. They had learned that lesson from the coalition. Represented humanity at the first Free Council meeting. He was young for a diplomat, but he had earned his place through years of resistance work. We must establish rules, a representative from another species said. Rules about how species treat each other. The first rule should be simple, replied. No species shall be tribute or slave to another. Any empire that tries to conquer will face all of us together. The council voted unanimously in favor. On Earth, walked through a processing center where tribute children were being reunited with families. He had spent months searching for his sister through coalition records. Finally, he found her name in a facility on a distant world. A transport ship brought her home, waited at the spaceport, his heart pounding. When walked off the ship, she was 16 years old. 8 years had passed since the enforcers took her. She looked at without recognition. She had been so young when they were separated. I said softly. Something in his voice triggered a memory. Tears filled her eyes. Brother. They embraced and felt hope for the first time in years. She didn't remember much about being human, but she was home. They would help her heal. They would help all the stolen children heal. Captain retired from military service after the war ended. Her ship, was turned into a museum. Children came from across human space to see the vessel that had fought in the first battle against the coalition. Spent her retirement writing about the war. Not just the battles, but the stories of ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. The engineers who built ships in secret. The pilots who flew suicide missions. The families who hid rebels. The children who survived being taken. Why write all this down? Someone asked her. Because in 100 years, people might forget how close we came to extinction, replied. They need to remember that freedom isn't free. It costs blood and sacrifice and determination. Continued his work, but now he built ships for exploration instead of war. Project Prometheus became the foundation for humanity's expansion into the galaxy as equals rather than slaves. What will you do now? His assistant asked him. We spent 15 years preparing for one war, replied. Now I'll spend the rest of my life making sure we never need to fight another. A monument was built on Earth on the spot where his house once stood. It listed the names of every human who died fighting for freedom, millions of names, but at the top was a simple inscription. They said no more. We echoed forever. Minu returned to Earth after years in space. He walked through streets that were being rebuilt, past buildings that were rising from ruins. Children played in parks that had been battlefields. Life was returning to normal, or at least to a new normal. Someone recognized him and called out, Ambassador, the man who told the coalition we were done serving. Minu smiled and waved, but he didn't feel like a hero. He had just been one person among millions who refused to accept slavery. The real heroes were the ones who never came home. At the Galactic Council, species from across the galaxy gathered for the first time as equals. There were no masters, no vassals, no tribute, just free peoples trying to build something better. A representative from one of the former vassal species stood to speak. For 200 years, my people prayed for liberation. We thought it would never come. Then we watched humans fight, and we learned that chains only hold you if you accept them. Humanity taught us that freedom is worth dying for. And worth living for, added. We didn't fight to dominate. We fought because existence as slaves wasn't existence at all. Now we build together or we don't build at all. Across the galaxy, 3 major empires had collapsed or reformed under pressure from rebellious tributary species. The balance of power had permanently shifted. Never again would conquest be easy. Never again would species submit without resistance. Years later, a young girl from a distant world asked her parent, "What are humans like?" The parent, whose species had been freed during the rebellions, thought carefully before answering. Humans are the ones who taught the galaxy that no empire lasts forever. They're the ones who showed us that determination matters more than strength. They're the species that looked at impossible odds and said, "No more." "Are they scary?" the child asked. "Only if you try to put chains on them," the parent replied. "To everyone else, they're friends. Strange friends who refuse to give up, who fight impossible battles and who somehow win through sheer stubbornness. But friends nonetheless." The child looked up at the stars and wondered what it would be like to meet a human someday. To meet someone from the species that broke an empire through refusal alone. On Earth, the last treaty document was sealed and archived. The Coalition War, as it came to be called, was officially over. Humanity had survived. They had won. And most importantly, they had changed the galaxy forever. The age of empires was ending. The age of free worlds was beginning. And it had all started with humans who simply refused to accept no more was enough.